Republicans in the U.S. Senate are asking Democrats to delay the start of the impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump. They want to hold off until February. So what does this mean for Trump and his legal team? Joining us to discuss is Newsmax contributor Jordan Sekulow. He's also the executive director of the American Center for Law and Justice. Jordan, great to see you here. As you know, we are waiting for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to send the articles to the Senate. But once she does, Mitch McConnell wants to wait until February to hold the trial. As we know, he's no longer majority leader. How do you see this timeline playing out?
I think it's a deal-making proposition, one, to give the parties time to do the adequate briefing. And the way he laid out the schedule was that briefing would be done pretty early in February, which is only about 8 days away. So the first week and a half of February, you start getting the briefing, and the trial would be about mid-month, and that would give the president's new attorney for this impeachment. The president, like us, we're still working for President Trump, is under what I would call lawfare. It's a term we use usually internationally, but he is being just harassed now, not just as president, but as former president, with the New York Attorney General, the DA, still House committees going after him in court. And this is another example of that. And so now we've got a new team member in Butch Bowers, so the president will be well represented. We can talk about him in a minute. But what we're seeing is a much shorter schedule, too, than what we saw in the impeachment trial while I was on the floor of the Senate that lasted 3 weeks and was a month in between the House sending over the articles. And it was multiple articles of impeachment, very divisive. But also you had all that testimony in the House of Representatives, all those hearings, so all this kind of evidence, if you will, and testimony to put into the record. That's not the case here. You had a 2-hour floor debate in the House of Representatives and one article of impeachment. So it's going to be different than what people saw last time around.
Right. Of course, if it were to happen in February, this would occur within the first 100 days of Joe Biden's administration. He's got a lengthy list of things he wants to accomplish during that time. This would pull some focus from those goals. Of course, when you've got senators presenting these arguments and listening to the hearings here, realistically, could a decision be made within a week's time for this trial?
I think so. I think this will be very quick. And so I think the idea for Mitch McConnell is that, one, the president's got his legal team now. Butch Bowers is going to be leading that out of South Carolina. He's represented, including the current governor of South Carolina and the two previous governors of South Carolina, including Nikki Haley. He's been a special counsel before under the Bush administration. He's handled, he was the elections commission, head of the elections commission for South Carolina earlier in the 2000s. So he's kind of done it all legally on these types of issues and ethics kind of issues, complaints that aren't necessarily legal issues where it's not anything that the president said would never hold up in a court of law as any kind of charge or crime. So I think is a perfect attorney for this. He'll build out the team. And all of us then who are still on the Trump legal team are able to, while we'll pay close attention to this, and obviously we want the Butch Bowers to be very successful, we can continue to work on all these issues that were stalled while he was president, but now are ramping up. I call it lawfare again. So President Trump has got kind of incoming from all over the place, and it's harassment. It's harassment now of a former president. He used to call it a witch hunt, but to think that a former president would still be under this kind of harassment is just absurd. But that's where the focus will be, is getting that all handled and done so the President Trump can move on and make decisions about the future.
Okay, well, before we get to that, let's talk about clearly how Mitch McConnell has said that the Capitol Hill mob was provoked by Trump and other powerful figures. That's what his way of describing it was. We also just spoke with Senator Marshall, who pointed out the divide within the GOP when it comes to impeachment voting. Do you believe that there are some members of the Republican Party who never want to see Donald Trump run again?
Absolutely. I mean, they made it pretty clear. But even some of those members, I think like Senator Ben Sasse, has serious questions about whether or not we should even be, and this will be raised obviously in the impeachment, trying a former president to be impeached for removal from office. That's the first kind of major move of impeachment, and it's dismissal from office, and he's already left. So even though he might be inclined to support impeachment and not want to see President Trump run again, he's got constitutional issues with this impeachment. And then, of course, you've got some of the others. I think it will be more likely to see a handful. But again, it's a tall order. I want to make this clear to everybody. They've got to get 17 out of 50 Republicans to vote to impeach the president. Unless something spectacular were to happen between now and February, and I'm not even sure what that would be. I can't count more than like 4 or 5, maybe 6 on my hand that would be inclined to vote for impeachment because of the political consequences to themselves, not even regardless of the issue. And I do believe we're going to see again, yet President Trump thrust into the spotlight without him having to say a word, everybody talking about him, and then he'll be able to, when this trial is over, once again hold up a newspaper, probably be even a mainstream paper like the Washington Post. They'll say, acquitted again. The first time it said acquitted, this time it'll be acquitted again, which means he will be fully vindicated that he did nothing wrong.
So let's assume or talk hypothetical situations that that's correct and he holds up the newspaper. What's the president's next move? And have you spoken to him about how he plans to maybe communicate with his supporters? We know that he can't send out a tweet.
That's interesting you asked that. We're working actually with a number of different kind of platforms have come to the president, to more of the social media side. He hasn't chosen yet one particular to utilize because of, again, the uncertainty around whether or not it'll be immediately shut down. I mean, that's the biggest problem right now, is that if he interacts, will that company come under so much pressure that either they're deplatformed, like we saw with Parler, or they feel like they've got to remove him from their services. So that is something being worked on as we speak. The president's got a team that he brought from the White House and from the campaign working on that. And of course, his other focus, obviously, is getting things back on track. Business, the huge Trump business, and the a audit by the IRS that everybody thought wasn't really happening. It is, let me tell you, as one of the attorneys, it's still ongoing. And these cases out of New York and possibly Washington, D.C. that we're working on at the from the district attorney and also a House committee that still is trying to get his tax records from the U.S. Supreme Court. Are they going to still want his records now that he's a former president, and why? So that they can continue to harass him. This is all a move to try and, I think, it's cancel the president. But by having the impeachment trial, they're putting him right back in the spotlight again. I think Butch Bowers and that team, the Trump team, yet again, like we were last time, will be successful. And that might be a time you see the president start to re-engage more. I think, he just left office. He's getting everything kind of set up in his new home base. And getting a lay of the land of what needs to be handled. And I will tell you, he's got a lot of incoming for a former president. Even for, when you talk about Hillary Clinton and those folks, they didn't have this kind of incoming, even when we knew they destroyed their servers. And this president has just got incoming from all angles legally. Yeah. And that's why we call it lawfare. And I think so he wants to get that handled. Sure. He wants to get control of the business and then also get this impeachment done. All right. Facing legal challenges and still trying to communicate with his supporters. We'll see how he does it. Sekulow joining us on the program. Jordan, thanks so much. Thanks, Emma.